You feel the marble cold beneath your knees. The air tastes of incense and something sweeter, wine, perhaps perfume, or the musk of bodies pressed too close in papal chambers. Candlelight flickers across faces you recognize. Cardinals, ambassadors, your own father seated on a throne that should belong to Christ's humblest servant. And then you see them, 50 women, silk falling from shoulders like petals from dying roses, crawling across the floor for chestnuts while Rome's most powerful men lean forward to watch. Was this really how the daughter of a pope spent All Hallows' Eve in 1501? Did Lucrezia Borgia truly transform the Vatican into a theater of flesh and forbidden desire? Or was she history's most slandered woman, a pawn sacrificed on the chessboard of Renaissance power, her name dragged through centuries of mud by enemies who understood that destroying a woman's reputation was easier than defeating her father's armies? Before we unravel this mystery, I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. It amazes me that a scandal from over 5 centuries ago still reaches across continents, connecting us through our fascination with power's darkest corners. The truth about Lucrezia Borgia doesn't fit comfortably into heroes or villains. It's messier than that, more human than that. Rome, 1492. The College of Cardinals gathered in sweltering August heat to choose a new pope. But this wasn't divine selection. This was an auction. Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, a Spaniard whose appetites for women and power were equally insatiable, moved through the conclave distributing promises like communion wafers. 4 mule loads of silver to one cardinal, a lucrative bishopric to another. The abbeys and castles of wealthy seas changing hands in whispered Latin negotiations. When white smoke finally rose from the Sistine Chapel, it announced something unprecedented. Pope Alexander VI, a man who already had 4 acknowledged children and mistresses scattered across Rome like confetti. The Spanish had conquered the papacy not with faith, but with Borgia gold. In the Vatican's private apartments, 13-year-old Lucrezia watched her world transform overnight. She'd been born in 1480 to Vanozza de Catane, her father's longtime mistress, a girl raised in Rome's shadows, educated beyond most noblewomen, fluent in Italian, Spanish, French, and Latin. She could discuss philosophy with scholars and compose poetry that made courtiers weep. But none of that mattered now. Her father was God's representative on earth, and she had just become the most valuable unmarried woman in Italy. Giovanni Sforza first saw his future bride in 1493 and probably thought himself fortunate. The Pope's daughter, barely 13, golden-haired and delicate as a Botticelli angel. The marriage would cement his family's alliance with the Vatican, securing military support from the most powerful throne in Christendom. The wedding ceremony in the Vatican blazed with enough wealth to feed Rome's poor for a decade: silk from Venice, gold from Spanish mines, music that echoed through halls where saints' bones rested in jeweled reliquaries. But Giovanni didn't understand papal arithmetic. In Alexander's calculations, alliances were temporary and daughters were renewable resources. For 4 years, Giovanni lived inside the Borgia household. He attended family dinners where Cesare Borgia, Lucrezia's older brother, brilliant and terrifying in equal measure, discussed military campaigns with the casual brutality of someone describing a hunt. He watched Alexander dote on his daughter with affection that seemed, to Renaissance eyes accustomed to patriarchal distance, unusually tender. He observed private moments when doors closed and guards were dismissed. What he saw in those 4 years would either damn Lucrezia forever or reveal the depths of political slander's power. By 1497, Alexander's compass spun toward France. The French king offered bigger bribes, better armies, more promising paths to Borgia domination of the Italian peninsula. Giovanni's family, allies of Naples, enemies of France, suddenly represented yesterday's strategy. In Renaissance politics, yesterday's strategy meant today's liability. The annulment required legal gymnastics that would have impressed Houdini. Alexander declared Giovanni impotent, unable to consummate the marriage, preserving Lucrezia's supposed virginity for her next political transaction. There was one problem with this sworn testimony. Giovanni's first wife had died in childbirth. His manhood functioned perfectly well. The Pope had just committed perjury before God and man, wrapped in papal authority that made him unquestionable. Giovanni's revenge arrived not with swords but with words that would echo through 5 centuries. Standing before Italian courts, financially ruined and politically humiliated, he made an accusation so shocking that scribes hesitated before recording it. Lucrezia had committed incest with both her father, the Pope, and her brother Cesare. The Holy Father was defiling his own daughter. The cardinal's son was sleeping with his sister. The Vatican had become a brothel where blood relations meant nothing, and sacred vows were jokes whispered between silk sheets. Renaissance. Italy exploded. Here were the Spanish outsiders, foreign interlopers occupying St. Peter's throne, and they were monsters who violated nature's most fundamental laws. The scandal was too delicious, too politically useful, too perfectly designed to destroy Borgia legitimacy. But pause here. Consider what Giovanni risked by making this claim. False accusations against a pope could mean excommunication, assassination, the complete destruction of whatever remained of his family's power. Giovanni wasn't reckless. He was calculating. Would a man gamble everything on pure fabrication? Or had he witnessed something during those 4 years inside Borgia walls, something he couldn't prove but couldn't forget? The rumors metastasized through Italy like plague. Every gesture between Lucrezia and Cesare became evidence. Every private audience with her father gained sinister significance. When she laughed at her brother's jokes, witnesses whispered about unnatural intimacy. When she kissed Alexander's ring, observers detected forbidden passion. Renaissance society transformed normal family affection into pornographic theater, projecting its darkest fantasies onto a teenage girl who had never chosen any of this. Yet something strange flickered beneath the accusation's surface. Lucrezia never denied them with hysterical outrage. She didn't weep publicly about her violated honor or demand her accusers face justice. Instead, she smiled that enigmatic smile and changed the subject. Was this the composure of someone falsely accused? Or the confidence of someone who understood that certain truths were too dangerous for public consumption? The poison allegations wove themselves into Lucrezia's legend like golden thread in funeral shrouds. She allegedly wore a hollow ring, La Bella Veneziana, containing toxins potent enough to drop a horse. At dinner parties, she would twist its mechanism, dispensing death into wine cups while discussing Petrarch. The image was irresistible, a golden-haired angel dealing murder while quoting love poetry. Renaissance. Italy worshipped and feared poison equally. It was the perfect weapon, silent, untraceable, leaving victims to die in apparent natural agony while their killers maintained perfect alibis. Poison was also considered feminine warfare, requiring intimacy instead of strength. A woman could poison a man while sharing his bed, making love and death dance together in ultimate betrayal. Did Lucrezia actually poison anyone? The evidence is frustratingly circumstantial. People around the Borgias died with suspicious regularity. Her brother Juan, found floating in the Tiber with 9 stab wounds, had poison weakened him first? Cardinals who opposed Alexander's policies and died of sudden fever, victims of papal hospitality? Her lover Perotto, who plunged from a Vatican window after allegedly fathering her child, suicide or murder? But poison leaves no evidence, and accusations require proof. What remained were whispers, mathematical improbabilities, and the undeniable fact that Alexander's enemies had a disturbing habit of dying at politically convenient moments. Then came Alfonso of Aragon in 1498. 17 years old, heartbreakingly handsome, heir to Naples' royal line. He looked at Lucrezia with something she'd rarely experienced, genuine affection untainted by political calculation. She was 18 now, already a veteran of marriage as warfare, but Alfonso made her laugh. He wrote her love poetry that wasn't about alliances. For 2 years, they played at being a real couple. Political winds shifted. Alfonso's royal connections became liabilities when Alexander needed different alliances. On July 15, 1500, assassins attacked Alfonso on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica, leaving him wounded but alive. He recovered enough to return to his apartments, surrounded by guards and his devoted wife's constant attention. 1 month later, strangers in papal livery entered his chambers and strangled him in his own bed. Lucrezia was in another room. Whether by coincidence, cowardice, or complicity, history cannot say. But the timing was surgical. Alfonso's death cleared the path for more advantageous papal marriages. It also fed the darkest suspicions about Lucrezia's role in eliminating inconvenient husbands. Her grief at Alfonso's funeral seemed genuine. Tears stained her cheeks. Sobs racked her shoulders during the Requiem Mass. But she also accepted condolences with practiced grace, the smooth performance of someone who understood that dead husbands were occupational hazards in papal politics. Which response was real? Perhaps both. Perhaps she'd learned to feel multiple truths simultaneously. The mysterious Borgia baby arrived in 1501 like a riddle wrapped in christening gowns. No clear parentage, no official explanation, just another mouth to feed in a family drowning in scandal. 2 contradictory papal bulls offered different fathers, one naming Alexander, another claiming Cesare. Lucrezia acknowledged the child as her half-brother, but Rome's gossips preferred more salacious mathematics. Was the baby hers, born from her affair with the murdered Pirato? Was he the fruit of incest with her father? With her brother? The child himself became a living question mark, raised in the Vatican with titles and lands despite his disputed origins, resembling both Alexander and Cesare, enough to support either paternity claim while also possessing Lucrezia's golden hair. Then came October 31st, 1501. All Hallows' Eve, the night when barriers between sacred and profane dissolved completely. Cesare Borgia invited 50 prostitutes to his Vatican apartments for entertainment that redefined papal hospitality. The women danced clothed at first, silk rustling across marble floors while cardinals and papal functionaries watched from cushioned chairs. Wine flowed like communion sacrament. Then the garments came off. Johann Burchard, the papal master of ceremonies, recorded every detail with clinical precision. Naked courtesans performed for the Holy Father himself. Alexander, watching from his throne while his son Cesare orchestrated the proceedings, and daughter Lucrezia sat beside them. Burning candelabras were placed on the floor, chestnuts scattered across marble tiles, and the women crawled on hands and knees to collect them while Rome's most powerful men evaluated their performance. Prizes were announced for the most enthusiastic sexual displays: silk tunics, jeweled shoes, golden ribbons. The Vatican, seat of Christian moral authority, transformed into a brothel and arena where flesh competed for imperial favor. According to Burchard's testimony, Lucrezia didn't just witness this spectacle. She participated in judging the competitions, awarding prizes to winners, laughing at the performances like someone born to such entertainment. The banquet of chestnuts spread through Europe's courts with wildfire velocity. Every retelling added new details, each more shocking than the last. Did Lucrezia dance naked with the prostitutes? Did she compete for prizes herself? The scandal served multiple purposes. Alexander's enemies used it as evidence of papal unworthiness. Foreign powers weaponized moral outrage against Spanish influence, and everyone agreed that the Borgias had transformed Christ's earthly kingdom into something unrecognizable. Lucrezia's third marriage to Alfonso d'Este in December 1501 required financial negotiations that resembled buying damaged merchandise at discount prices. Her reputation had become so toxic that Alfonso's family demanded 100,000 ducats, enough gold to fund armies or build cathedrals, the price of papal scandal. She approached the altar telling her father that her previous husbands had been very unlucky. Renaissance understatement at its most chilling. 2 dead husbands before age 21 suggested either supernatural curse or deliberate pattern. The journey to Ferrara became a procession of whispered commentary. Every town she passed drew crowds who stared at the papal daughter who had allegedly poisoned husbands, committed incest, and watched prostitutes perform for her father's amusement. Her golden hair caught sunlight like a beacon, making peasants cross themselves and nobles calculate whether beauty and intelligence could coexist with such rumored depravity. But something unexpected happened in Ferrara. Alfonso d'Este represented different Italian nobility, older, more established, less dependent on papal favor. His family valued culture over conspiracy, artistic achievement over political manipulation. For the first time in her life, Lucrezia could exercise her considerable intellectual gifts in an environment that rewarded scholarship rather than scheming. She became a patron of poets and artists. Pietro Bembo, Renaissance Italy's most celebrated poet, exchanged letters with her containing language that danced around explicit declarations while leaving little doubt about their emotional intensity. He praised her intelligence in terms usually reserved for male scholars, acknowledging intellectual equality few Renaissance men would concede to any woman. Did their relationship remain confined to literary exchange? The evidence points in multiple directions simultaneously, deep emotional connection that could have been either purely mental or thoroughly physical. Over the next 18 years, Lucrezia produced 8 children, established herself as a capable administrator during Alfonso's military campaigns, and became known for charitable works and religious devotion. The scandalous papal daughter transformed into a respected duchess, but these peaceful decades couldn't erase youth's shadows. Every charitable donation was viewed through the lens of previous allegations. Every religious observance interpreted as guilty conscience requiring divine forgiveness. She died in 1519 at age 39, probably from complications following childbirth, an ordinary death for a woman whose life had been anything but ordinary. Centuries later, Alexandre Dumas would declare that she had a wild imagination, was an unfaithful woman by nature, the daughter and mistress of her father while engaging in intimate relations with her brother. Lord Byron stole locks of her hair from Milan's Ambrosian Library in 1816, calling them the prettiest and fairest imaginable, praising her love letters as the most beautiful in existence. The legend of Lucrezia Borgia continued seducing men across centuries, a woman who had allegedly transgressed every moral boundary while maintaining intelligence and beauty that inspired devotion long after her death. But what actually happened? The evidence surrounding Lucrezia's alleged crimes presents maddening complexity. Giovanni Sforza lived intimately with the Borgia family for 4 years. Why risk everything on claims he couldn't support? Yet his timing coincided perfectly with his annulment anger and his family's political displacement. The poison allegations gained credibility from undeniable patterns of convenient deaths, but attribution to Lucrezia specifically relied more on gendered assumptions about feminine warfare than concrete evidence. The incest accusations struck at Christian moral teaching's heart while serving Borgia enemies' political needs perfectly. What emerges isn't definitive guilt or innocence, but rather a young woman trapped in circumstances that made moral purity nearly impossible to maintain. Born into a family where political survival required constant moral compromise. Raised in an environment where love and power intersected dangerously. Married repeatedly for reasons that had nothing to do with personal choice. Did she commit incest? The evidence suggests political slander rather than actual transgression, but absolute certainty remains elusive. Renaissance families often displayed physical affection that modern observers might misinterpret, and enemies could easily weaponize normal behavior for propaganda. Did she poison her enemies? The pattern of deaths suggests systematic obstacle elimination, but Lucrezia's specific involvement remains speculative. Attribution often reflected gendered assumptions rather than factual investigation. Did she participate willingly in Vatican moral degradation? The banquet of chestnuts certainly occurred, but Lucrezia's role could have ranged from enthusiastic participation to reluctant compliance with family expectations. Young women in papal courts possessed limited agency in refusing their father's commands. The truth probably lies between absolute innocence and complete depravity. She was neither saintly victim nor demonic seductress. Instead, she was a remarkably intelligent woman who survived impossible circumstances through compliance, manipulation, and strategic moral flexibility. Renaissance. Italy operated under codes modern audiences struggle to understand. Political necessity justified behaviors peacetime ethics would condemn. Survival required adaptations comfortable observers cannot comprehend. Family loyalty superseded individual conscience in ways contemporary individualism barely fathoms. We will never know complete truth about most historical private events. Documents were destroyed, witnesses died, propaganda replaced factual reporting. But we know this: we cannot judge these figures using our contemporary moral frameworks. Life in Renaissance Italy was fundamentally different. More violent, more uncertain, more dependent on family loyalty and political calculation for basic survival. Lucrezia Borgia lived in a world where daughters were political assets, marriage was diplomatic strategy, and survival often required moral compromises that comfortable modern observers cannot comprehend. Whether victim or villain depends partly on evidence history has obscured and partly on moral frameworks that change across centuries. The Vatican still stands, its marble floors perhaps remembering October nights when chestnuts scattered like dice and powerful men watched women crawl. Somewhere in those ancient stones, if they could speak, lies the truth about a girl who became a legend. The Pope's daughter who either turned the Vatican into a brothel or was simply the most slandered woman in history, sacrificed on the altar of political necessity. Her hair, stolen by Byron, still rests in Milan. Her letters to Bembo still exist, revealing a mind sharp enough to match any man's intellect word for word. And her name still whispers through corridors of power as a warning about what happens when family, politics, and desire collide in spaces where God's representatives prove all too human. In the end, perhaps Lucrezia Borgia's greatest crime wasn't poison or incest or moral corruption. Perhaps it was simply being born female into a world that demanded she be both valuable commodity and convenient scapegoat. A woman intelligent enough to play the game but never powerful enough to change its rules.